What is up, guys? I am starting a new series called Everything I Learned from ... Before I get into telling you what that is all about, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe, like button, all that good stuff. Leave some comments and feedback below about the content of this video. But this is basically a series. This is the overview video, kind of explaining what this whole series is about. And then it's definitely something that I will have ongoing for a while. And I'm going to give a fair warning. I actually have some notes for this video, which is a rarity for me. So if I'm looking down every once in a while, I'm looking at my notes to make sure I don't forget anything. But I kind of want to just start with saying that this isn't necessarily your typical, here's what I learned from this course, this certification, this class, this degree, whatever. There is some value to that for sure. And I'll probably do some of those videos. Maybe I review a whole certification, or I ask a lot of people that say, oh, is it worth getting an exercise science degree? I can kind of share my thoughts on that. But I also want to do some of the not typical stuff, really with the goal of helping you guys, everyone watching this, understand that learning for yourself just to be a better trainee, to help for better workouts, or I have a lot of coaches and a lot of trainers that watch this stuff to be a better trainer, isn't just about always your typical places. And there's a lot of places, a lot of people, and a lot of opportunities to learn stuff. And I think some people just miss that because they're not basically just aware of that. So again, I will review some certifications. I will review basically some individuals that started certifications. But more importantly, I'm going to talk about individuals that have impacted me, with their personal experience, their personal testimony, the principles and things that they've brought to me. So yes, it'll be some educators, but it'll also be fellow coaches, fellow peers. It'll be athletes that I've worked with, and even some people basically outside of the industry. So what is the goal of all this kind of stuff, aside from some of the things that I already said? Some of this, of course, is just to pay it forward. So meaning that I've been lucky. I've been doing this for a long time. I'll even talk about some of the stuff from my very beginning, starting training when I'm 15 years old. I've been doing this as a profession in some capacity since 1920, my first time working in a gym, and also starting being a trainer when I'm 20 years old. So I've been doing this for a long time, and I've had a lot of positive impact. And again, the more I even been thinking about this series, just more and more things keep popping up. So some of it is, again, to pay it forward. Kind of for anybody that's still able to watch these that are the individuals that impacted me, this is kind of a thank you. So if you got one coming, or maybe you think you got one coming, we'll find out. But it's kind of a thank you to those individuals. And then again, also just so people kind of have a little better of an understanding where I'm coming from. I have people say that all the time, or ask that all the time, where did you learn this stuff, and how did you figure out this stuff, and what certifications did you take, or what degree did you have? And the reality is I always want to answer that question. I mean, that's a huge compliment, right? Someone saying, oh, I like what you bring to the table. Where did you get this? And a lot of people are, I want to do the same thing. So some of it is not to kind of gatekeep in the industry, that pretend that I just kind of had all this get into my brain via osmosis, or that I'm super duper smart and it's something that you guys can't attain yourself. So I want to really go in depth with, here's all the places and all the people that have impacted me. And then realizing too, that again, it's not a short, simple answer. It's not just, oh, well, I got my degree and that's where I learned all my stuff, or I took this certification and that's where I learned all my stuff. So some of it is, I don't want there to be any kind of mystery behind it, or act like, again, there's something magical about myself. And at the same time, I can't always answer that question easily because it is complicated. Like I said, kind of in the beginning, there's a ton of places. Some of it's degrees, some of it's certifications. But if I really look and dig deep, it's a lot of different people over a long period of time. So, some of the things that I hope to get with that as well, too, is I hope you guys actually take away some tangible things. So over the course of all this, of course, I want you to say, oh, I learned this maybe specific thing about volume, or this specific thing about splits, or this specific thing about exercise selection. So I do hope that you guys can take away some tangible things. I'm thinking about, one, how I learned things that benefited me, but then also I kind of want to cover a little bit of a spectrum because everybody obviously learns differently. So I do want to leave some kind of solid, hard facts here and there, some golden nuggets. But I want to share some things as well that help me. So just honestly kind of share some stories. Lots of times when I went to certifications and I'm working with a coach that I know has worked with these athletes or whoever it is and had these experiences, and when they'd go off on these side tangents and tell these stories, or this time when they were coaching or when they were younger, I love that stuff. One, because I just like working out. I like the industry. I like anything having to do with working out. But then two, it's like a kind of a cool combination of, I like hearing about cool athletes, cool experiences. And I like to take away, there's always something you can kind of gain from application, where it's not just about the X's and O's and what's on paper. Sometimes it's about how do these coaches communicate with their athletes? How do they inspire their athletes? How do they get the most out of them? And some of it's just cool, funny stories, which again, if there's a cool, funny story, why wouldn't we want more people to know that cool, funny story and just carry it on, something positive or good, again, about that coach or about that individual? From there, a real big theme I want to take from this, because this is something that if I really think about that's had the biggest or one of the biggest impacts on me, is when I kind of had a shift in the way that I would try and gain information. At some point in time, where there are times when, again, maybe it was because of my ego or my inexperience or who knows what, where I had this notion of trying to find out what's the best way, who's the best coach, what's the best method. And kind of everything to me in my brain was a little bit of a conflict. It was like, oh, well, this coach says this and that coach says this. And even when I gained new information, being completely honest, some of it was really kind of just an ego boost and not always going through, well, how does this actually help other people? And I see, honestly, now I feel like that's amplified even more so with social media, with the internet, with YouTube, where people are basically spending a lot of time and effort paying attention to the differences from coach to coach and spending time arguing about it or fighting about it. If you haven't heard me talk about this before, this notion of teams, I think is not a good thing overall. And so I really kind of had a shift. It's like, okay, well, one, how do I want to be a better coach? And what's the most valuable use of my time? And I think the most valuable use that anyone can have is look for results producing coaches. So that's a very important thing, because obviously some people just talk a good game or look a certain way or whatever it is. And if you actually look at what are their credentials, are they actually a trainer? Are they actually a coach? What is their actual education? I'm not saying there's one thing that someone needs to have. There's people that have great information that all of their education is just from universities and from kind of the collegiate setting. There's some people that have been in the trenches training for a million years. Of course, if someone has their own body of work, that is important. So if there's someone you relate to and they've worked their ass off and they're kind of sharing their own story, all that stuff is great. But at the end of the day, you do want to spend time, in my opinion, looking for results producing coaches and look at the similarities they have more so than the differences. And I find that funny is some people will, I'll get tagged in this coach versus that coach. And I'm like, I know that coach, actually. I don't think people know that. We've talked to an extent and we might agree on 95% of the same stuff, but someone's going to kind of tag me in something that's for the 5% or try and poke me or the other one with a metaphorical stick, trying to get some arguments out there. And the reality is when you actually talk with coaches that are training people, producing results in person, lots of times those differences are, you just kind of chalk it up to oh, well, maybe they know something I don't know, or maybe they just have a different application or a different approach. And it's really not this battle or this conflict that some people need to make it out to be. And a lot of people, I think, just waste time with that. They get lost in the weeds. Often it's people fighting over this small little nuance. And the same person's maybe never adhered to a diet, doesn't sleep for more than 5 hours a night, doesn't train hard, and they'd rather just kind of fight over how many reps in reserve someone is training with, which again, couldn't be less important in the bigger scale of things. So that's one part, is your most time and effort, I think, should be focused on positive things. Focus on, again, where you have similarities between coaches. Because again, if all these coaches, let's say you follow 20 great coaches that produce great results, great certifications, wouldn't you want to know the things that they've all agreed upon? Because that would probably help you get a little bit of a fast track to producing better results for yourself, or again, if you're a coach, for your own clients. All that being said, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to figure things out or resolve those differences, as long as you don't make it out to be a bigger deal than it should be. So it's like, okay, well, this coach has this view on this, and this coach has this apparent opposing view. Just don't let that one, lead to paralysis by analysis. So again, I don't know what the hell to do in a gym now. Should I take 2 minutes rest or 4 minutes rest? Or should I do reps in reserve, or should I train to failure? You need to have those little differences, be able to take some time to analyze them, to kind of look into it, maybe eventually resolve them, maybe eventually figure out what works best for you. But at some point in time too, you just need to be able to compartmentalize those things. So again, I'm not saying that there's ever anything wrong with kind of moving this direction of you want the best information, ideally the best for you, or looking for improved knowledge, improved whatever it is. The X's and O's, of course, you can improve. But again, it's this thing about how do you spend your time? How do you spend your effort? How do you spend your emotion? And the reality is with training variables, there really shouldn't be any emotion involved. So aside from that, there's one you really have to realize too, this is a big thing for me, going through a whole bunch of different certifications. Whenever you meet someone, whenever you go through a certification, I joke that there's going to be, if I said, okay, I met this person, I took, 6 of this, coach's certifications, there's going to be a certain amount that just kind of sits in your brain right away. Like, oh, this makes sense. Here's the results. Here's how I can apply this. And then I joke that every certification has a little bit of Kool-Aid. If you don't understand the drink the Kool-Aid analogy, depending on where you're watching this from, look up drink the Kool-Aid. It's basically where some groups of people say, hey, just do this because we're all doing it. And so realize that there's no perfect individual. There's no perfect certification. And again, some information you're going to gain, You might think it's wrong. You might not know what to do with it. You might not understand it. And realize whenever that happens, there's a couple possibilities. One, realize you might not have the knowledge that person has. So somebody says something like, wow, that doesn't seem right, or I don't understand that. Realize a very real possibility is you're wrong. You lack the knowledge to really understand where that person is coming from. Two, and I'd say this is probably more common, realize maybe you just don't understand the application. Maybe you don't understand the population that they work with, where again, someone on paper could have all this neat, pretty, peer-reviewed evidence of here's why we do this when we're working with people. But then they actually talk to someone that's been training people in person for 20 years, producing great results. That person might just have a slightly different application, a slightly different experience, a slightly different population they work with. And as a result of that, they have something that maybe you don't quite have your head wrapped around yet. And then three, there's the reality of you could learn something from somebody that eventually you'll find out is just wrong. It's like, well, this seemed like good information at the time, or there is a reason this didn't really make sense. And again, with any of that stuff, all that stuff is fine. It's fine to have things you don't understand. It's fine to have things you don't disagree with. But just realize, again, I think more than any stuff is understanding there's multiple reasons for that. Again, it's nothing to fight about. It's nothing to say, oh, that person's an idiot or this person's smarter or stuff like that. It's just stuff that, again, it could be multiple reasons that you have that initial belief. And it might just take some time to maybe, really understand where to place that information. So some of that as well, too. Don't look for the perfect certification. Don't look for the perfect coach. Don't do the thing that I'm going to use all the sayings. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Where again, you have a coach, you like all this stuff, and they say this one thing, and you're like, oh, well, they must be dumb or whatever, because this doesn't make any sense or this is wrong. It's again the Bruce Lee saying of, take everything that's useful and valuable and then basically reject or, disregard the rest. So from all of that stuff, hopefully, again, a real goal of this whole series too is to really improve your critical thinking. I think that's the thing that a lot of people are missing now. There's so much information. There's so much information at our fingertips. I think a lot of people that consume a ton of this information, whether it's from YouTube or Instagram or blogs or membership sites or whatever it is, if your people are really honest with themselves, a lot of their current knowledge base is formed primarily on the last smart person they heard talk or the last smart person they read information from. Meaning, okay, we've gathered all this information and I have this belief on reps in reserve, or I have this, I'm sorry if I keep using that example, but whatever, it is what it is. And then I read something from another coach that makes a very strong, compelling, well-researched, well-articulated argument that says, oh, well, you really should be trained to failure, and here's why. And after reading that smart person that has good credentials and that articulated it well with a very compelling evidence or argument, you're like, oh, yeah, that's right, I should be training to failure. And I see a ton of people where they just really hop from person to person, and basically literally their current opinion is formulated from the last smart person they heard. And so the reality is, I think that's obviously not a good thing. I think it's a good thing to be able to take in information and just let it sit for a while. You don't have to formulate an opinion right away. You can watch a whole hour-long video on someone. You can consume an entire certification and just let it sit, let it marinate, start to apply a little bit here and there with yourself or with clients, and then slowly formulate an opinion or slowly integrate it within your training and your own principles. So again, I hope that all this kind of stuff helps you critically think a little bit better, help you slowly formulate your own opinions, your own principles, make your own training decisions, and just slowly add to all that stuff for you. Where again, if you're, take away something that could be a specific or a concept or a principle, again, ultimately, I want you guys to be able to make better decisions, think better for your own, and ultimately produce better results in the gym. Is really to a certain degree what it all comes down to, or produce better results for your clients. And so with all of that, to kind of sum up before I get to the last couple of bullet points of things I'm going to try and cover every video, if I had to really something with all of this is, I've said this a lot, and this is kind of one of my big major themes. If I have a major theme that's reoccurring within all my training, is the last overview and goal is to make you guys less emotional about things you shouldn't be emotional about. And again, kind of reiterating that's kind of the X's and O's, the training tools. There's nothing that should elicit an emotional response about proximity to failure, number of sets, what splits you're using, how you do your macronutrients. I want you guys to be able to take in information that's, again, just principles, just tools, just X's and O's, and not have an emotional response about it. I want you guys to critically think, slowly formulate your own opinions, formulate your own principles, and again, ultimately be able to do things or make better decisions for yourself and produce better results. And lastly, I want you guys to be more emotional about the things you should be emotional about, which is, why do you want to train in the first place? Why do you go into the gym? Why do we do these things to ourselves? Why do we hurt ourselves in the gym? Why do we inflict pain upon ourselves? Why do we maybe restrict our diets at times, or eat lots of food when we don't feel like it, or eat less food than we feel like eating? There's a lot of awesome stuff that goes into any kind of self-imposed challenge. Again, not using the analogy of training is going to war or anything like that, but the same reason people run marathons, the same reason that people do, challenges or whatever it is this whole deal should be fun. Training should be fun. The reasons you train should be fun. The people you train with, it should be fun. The experiences you have around other people, around other coaches, around some of your training partners. I can honestly say I've always enjoyed it. And as I look back and I kind of gain more information and more experience and really look at some of the people I've had time to work with and be around, I value it even more now. And so some people just go through the motions and go through this whole deal without really enjoying themselves along the way. So that is another thing is, be unemotional about the things you shouldn't be, and be extra emotional about really why are we doing this whole deal in the first place, and make sure you're enjoying it. Again, because at the end of the day, if you're training, you're trying to get better, you're trying to get smarter, and you're just grumpy and you're angry, and the people that spend time arguing online, like, what's the point of that? Life's too short, guys. And so the very last thing, if there's some things I'm going to try and keep very consistent from video to video, is I've always want to kind of have these few bullet points. So when I discuss an individual, I discuss a certification, I'm going to really kind of always discuss, like, what are the main principles I learned from that person? And some of it might be doubled down. It's like, I worked with this athlete and this person, and I really found from these two this principle of commitment or adherence or whatever it may be. So I really want to have one, what are some of the principles I learned from that person? And then two, I always want to share some of that individual's personal experience or personal application, and some of that ties into anecdotes, stories that they have about themselves, or stories that involve me with them as well too, where again, I really want to kind of give some examples of, like, oh, what does this actually look like in the trenches, in the field, when this person works with an athlete, when this person produces results, when this person said something specific to me that like clicks in my brain. I want to share some of that as well too, because again, when you actually have these experiences applied to an individual, applied to a person, it kind of makes them real. It brings them to life, and it has more meaning than just reading in a textbook. Here's this because of here's this. And then last, like I said, I'm going to have a lot of stories about a lot of people. And so some of it's just going to be to kind of keep those good, positive stories going, because some of the people I'm going to speak about are no longer with us. So again, some of it as well too is, again, just because, obviously, what do you want, your legacy to be? What do you want to be when you're no longer on this earth? I mean, for me, one, I hope first and foremost, my family has nice things to say about me. That's the most important. But it's nice if other people are going to share positive things about you, positive impact they had on you. And again, I think that's massively important to just kind of, again, pay that forward, put some good stuff out there. And let other people know the positive impact that some people had as well too. So really just kind of sharing some stories, some feel-good type stuff, hopefully as well too. So that is the overview video. I'm not sure how frequent I'm going to keep these going. So again, maybe we'll have them up, a story every week, every other week, whatever. We'll see how much you guys like them. And that's that. That's the start, the kind of the overview, explain this whole deal as you're watching all these going along. If you haven't, I'm going to say, if you haven't seen this video, pretty stupid thing to say when you're watching this video right now, but I'll always refer people back to this video if you're kind of understanding the purpose of all of them as we go along. And stay tuned for volume 1 coming your way very soon. Before I tell you what this series, start over. We're not off to a good start. And the goal of this whole video and this whole series, one of the big things is to, some of it is just to pay. We're gonna have to keep all these in here. Let's put them all together at the end. I normally don't have a whole lot, so we gotta save them.